everybody, Jim Edwards here, and welcome back to the Sales Copywriting Content Marketing Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, along with my trusty co-host and podcast producer, Mr. Stu Smith. Welcome, Stu.
Thank you, Jim.
It's episode 162 with my good buddy, Stu. And we're going to show you how to get through any type of issue you might have with your business. I got a good bunch of good rhymes in there.
There you go. Good one.
So what are we talking about today, Stu?
Well, Jim, I wrote down first book. Those were my show notes.
Ooh,
first book. So I was thinking, just looking at this week's content that you've been putting out, you have made some interesting posts about getting your first book created and done. And there's an easy button for that.
There is.
If an 11-year-old can do it, what's your excuse?
Hey, somebody read my newsletter. Thank you, Stu. Nice work.
Yeah. So I wanted to expand on that a little bit. Let's talk about getting your first book done, and what's your excuse? Why aren't you getting it done?
So I think in order to set the stage for that, it might be kind of fun to talk about our first books. And, between the two of us, we've got over 100 years of experience at this thing you call life. Did you realize that, Stu? You and I, between the two of us, have over a century of experience between us.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
And it wasn't 100 years. It wasn't 1 year 100 times. Okay. It was 100 years of learning. So I want to talk just for a minute about my first book. And then I want you to talk about your first book, just kind of your journey with that. I won't take one of those old man, half-hour story things. So I'm going to limit myself to like 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay. Sounds good.
So there's always an impetus. There's always something that happens for somebody to decide, hey, I'm going to write a book, or I ought to write a book. Often it's somebody else saying, hey, you ought to write a book. And that was that for me. My girlfriend said to me, hey, you're pretty smart. You ought to write a book. And I'm like, yeah, I am smart. I'm trying to impress this chick. Now, this chick next month will have been married to me for 28 years. So she was pretty smart. And she said, you ought to write a book. And I said, okay, I should write a book. So I said, okay, let me write a book. And I was in the mortgage business, but for whatever reason, I was like, I ought to write a book on how to sell your house yourself. Now, why? Well, because I'd done it, and I just kind of figured, you know what? Yeah, I mean, I've done it. I figured it out. Maybe I can sell it. And my initial thought was, I'll publish my book, and I'm going to get rich off the royalties. I'm going to, get sold in every bookstore, and I'm going to get checks every month, which is such BS. That's a reality for like 3 people a year. And I wasn't one of them. So the interesting thing is it took me 4 years to write the book. Took me 4 years to write the book because I had no clue how to write a book. And so I'd start and I'd stop and I'd start and I'd stop, and then I'd agonize over stuff. And then I was like trying to figure out how to lay it out. And then I finally got it done. I said, okay, let me send off. And now I'm going to get a publisher. I remember I called one of my history professors. It's like, who the hell are you going to ask when you don't know how to do something? You're like, well, somebody I think knows what they're doing. So I called somebody, an academic, who had never really ever sold any books whatsoever. And I said, hey, do you have an agent that you could refer me to? And she said, no. Who is this? I had to remind her who I was. Oh, yeah, I remember you. Call me James. And long story short, I ended up sending off the manuscript unsolicited to over 40 different publishers. Well, let me tell you, they don't have a system for accepting books, but they sure have a system for rejecting books. So as I was living in the trailer, man, I didn't have a lot of money. It cost a lot of money to get up 50 different things printed up, and the postage and everything. And I sent them off to all these publishers, just giddy with excitement, knowing that I'd have publishers fighting over this amazing book that I had put together. And within a few days, I got my answer. And my answer was not what I was expecting, because I started having these transcripts kicked back to me and sent back with these obvious, I mean, a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox, where it's all grainy and looks like someone with a palsy was trying to do the lettering by hand, basically telling me, here's your manuscript back. Don't ever send us anything again. And next time we'll charge you for the postage to send this thing that you didn't ask for, but we didn't ask for back. So I started throwing these things in a drawer. And one day I was like, I don't want to be in the mortgage business anymore. I want to be a real estate agent. And because I was just tired of the mortgage business. So I decided I was going to use that book to help me get my foot in the door with for sale by owners. I said, that could be my unique little thing. I don't know where this great idea came from. Maybe my wife was right. I was smart. I don't know. I usually did really stupid stuff back in my 20s. Oh. And so I didn't really have any money to have the book printed. So I took all the manuscripts that had been returned and I went down to Kinko's and got them comb bound. So I took these rejections and turned them into books. Nice. And started calling up for sale by owners and asking them if I could come take a look at their house. And then I'd drop a copy of the book on them. And a funny thing happened. A lot of people read the book because it wasn't real long. A few people were like, oh, hell no, I'm not going to do this. Would you come list our house for sale? Which I was like, woohoo, I'm a real estate agent. I can help you with that. A few people used the book and were able to sell their house and gave me a killer testimonial. And then I helped them buy their next house. So long story short, in my first full year in real estate, I took over 50 listings, the vast majority of which were either for sale by owners or expired listings. And that was kind of, if it had just stopped there, it was fine. I had used a book to make money. In fact, I made more money because I was getting on average a couple $1,000 per real estate transaction than I ever would have made if it had actually gotten published and it had done the average run of maybe 2,000 books that most business books do. And I would have made $1,000 or $2,000 and that would have been it for the whole thing. So the rest of the story in 30 seconds, 1997, I went to Homecoming, ran into a buddy of mine, and he and his dad owned an advertising agency. They'd gotten a web server. I asked him, hey, you think I could sell my book on the internet? That's, again, asking someone who has no clue. He said, sure. He didn't know. He was an idiot. I didn't like him when we were in the fraternity together. Why? But it just, something told me to ask him. And so then that took me on the 4-year journey of figuring out how to sell it. But the interesting thing is, over the years, what I learned was that a book is nothing more than, and I repeated the process over and over and over. And I'm like, shit, I can't take 4 years to do this. I got to do this faster. Yeah. And so the next one was faster. So I got it down to being able to put one together in about a week. And so what I realized, though, is that a book is nothing but information. A book is literally nothing but information in print form. So when you start looking at different strategies of how to get that information out of your head and get it into print form, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can turn something into a book and have a book done. And having a book and making money from a book is about a lot more than just trying to get a publisher to sell it for you, because a publisher actually doesn't sell books. Publishers print books. Authors are the ones who sell the books. So, but the publisher takes the majority of the money. So if I'm the one who's going to have to sell it, screw you, I'll publish it myself and keep all the money, is the way I look at it. So that's my first book story. I went a little bit long, sorry, but I'm old. So go ahead, Stu, tell the story of your first book.
Well, I can make mine a little short because mine was parallel to yours, but instead of publishers, I went for the agent. Right. So I got all these rejections.
But what made you think what was the catalyst? What was the spark that made you think that you, Stu Smith, could write a book? Was it a person? Was it an event? Was it an idea that came to you?
Oh, it was definitely some kid who was doing this. I wrote this. First of all, I wrote this 12-page workout, which I called 12 Weeks to Buds. right? And I emailed it to all the midshipmen at the Naval Academy. Yeah, completely free. Here's a workout I'm doing. Check it out if you're trying out for SEAL training or this Navy PST. Let's do this, right? And we all get on the same page and we do it. And I did it with, I don't know, probably 80 people, right? And those guys were getting in really good shape, crushing it to the point of like the guys were saying, "Man, you should make this a book." I was like, "Huh, okay, well, I already just gave it away to all you guys. So let me see what I can do." So I started actually creating, the exercise descriptions and taking the pictures and doing that and explaining the process of joining, why you need to take this test. And I put in just a notebook, just your regular 3-ring binder notebook. Didn't even take pictures of the pictures and put them into the document. I taped the pictures that I took from a regular camera and just taped them like it looked like a scrapbook, right?
Okay.
So that was my rough draft, and it just so happened to try to create that as a first of all, I tried and I failed probably about a dozen times to find an editor because everybody said you need not an editor,
An agent.
You need an agent, literary agent to get this. So hunting down through the beginning stages of the internets of late 90s, late to mid 90s, probably 96, 97, I guess, trying to hunt that all down, and that meant miserably, just like yours. And so I said, screw it. I'll just go directly to the publishing houses. Right. And I started with the one in my backyard, which is right on the Naval Academy. Navy Institute Press is right there. Mm-hmm. Right. And that was a logical solution for me. And it went well. My pitch went well. Everything went well. Yeah, we can do this, get this done in a year. And it just so happened another publisher was on the Naval Academy base doing a Naval Academy workout book using the program that I created for the regular midshipmen, not just the spec ops guys, but the regular midshipmen, just for regular PEP and their physical training test. And he just found me, and I was walking him through and introducing him to the people to where he's going to take his pictures and all that stuff. And I said, by the way, I wrote this. What do you think? Right, and just handed it to him. And he was like, "Whoa, this is awesome!" And he had it, basically under contract within a week, and then so it was just really lucky.
So what you're saying, I just want to summarize this. So basically, Stu came up with an idea. He spammed a bunch of government employees. He then ghettoed it together and accosted a guy in a hallway in a government institution in order to get his book done. So what the lesson here for all of us is that don't let anything stand in your way. If you got to spam, if you got to accost people, if you have, I'm just playing. It's totally just playing. But the key was you took action and you were too stupid to stop. And look where you are. Imagine if you had not done that. Imagine you wouldn't be where you are. You'd probably be at some sucky corporate job around the Beltway, working for some Beltway bandit, hating life, probably wouldn't have stayed in as great a shape, and you'd be driving a station wagon to and from some nameless box building around 464 and just hating life. But because you wrote that book, you became Stu Smith.
All right. Well, I actually wound up continuing using that publisher a dozen more times. So he actually published 13 books for me, which I will tell you, it's not bad. It's nice to have a big group of professionally done books that are in bookstores and that are in, Amazon. But I will tell you this, I have made so much more money, not on those books, on my own books that I self-published or, printed myself or got Lulu to do them and sell them myself. It's night and day difference. In fact, I don't even notice publishing royalties.
Right.
It's like as the check comes in, as like just mixes in with everything else. It's not even worth like waiting for that check. So it's just what it is. That so I have found that self-publishing, using those books to promote your business is the best answer for someone who is trying to write their first book, right?
Sure.
Unless you have a great literary mind that can blow up a fictional story that is like Harry Potter-esque level, right? You're probably not going to make enough money on your book to quit your day job.
Well, and even if you do, you have to be so prolific that you're coming out with now not a book a year, but the way people go with these Kindles and Kindle Unlimited and all that other stuff, if you're going that route, you've got to crank out like a book a month. You got to be cranking out, and it better be good because they're moving on to the next one. So, and the chances of the chances of that actually happen are about the same as taking your paycheck, going down to the 7-Eleven and putting it all into scratchers. It's like, this is my this is my retirement plan. I got $1,000 and I'm buying the whole thing of dollar scratchers. And that's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to make my money for retirement. This is not a sound strategy. But looking at a book, so like your book, the 12 what was it? 12 weeks to buds?
Yeah.
Was that the name? That's the name of the book.
That's the subtitle.
The original book.
That was the subtitle. Originally, that was my book. That was my title. It was a complete guide to Navy SEAL fitness.
Okay. 12 weeks to buds.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys who made it through buds bought that book and did what you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Countless.
A lot of guys bought that book and said, "Oh, hell no, I can't do this." But they still bought the book.
True.
And your business, though, really became teaching it, writing about it, and then you added a component of high-level coaching to it as well, or a couple layers of coaching.
But I also diversified, too. If you have a business market, for instance, like your friend who trained dogs.
Right.
If you were to parallel my journey with that person's, I wrote that one book about one fitness test, but I continued writing 30 more that I self-published about all the other fitness tests that are out there in the military, law enforcement, and firefighter world.
Right.
That person could have done the same thing as, training dogs and then writing 20 other books on training different breeds of dogs.
Right.
And so that's a way to also create, similar content that works for your genre that you're creating. But at the same time, it's just different books.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things you never want to do in business is try and take a new product to a market you know nothing about. So what you want to do is either bring a new product to a market you know really, really well, or take a proven product to a new market to see if it can do that. So like you say, I mean, general dog training or dog training mistakes then becomes Chihuahua training mistakes to avoid, and Rottweiler training mistakes to avoid, and Pit Bull training mistakes to avoid type thing. And you got to do a little bit more than just a search and replace. Hey, Control H, I got a whole new book. No, not quite that.
Yeah.
But it is easier, and once you got the Legos and the building blocks and stuff, and I think that's important when you move beyond the first book, is to say, hey, look, am I building? I lost your picture there, Stu.
Yeah, sorry.
So got to pay the bill. Now he's gone completely. All right. So this is where we come back to the idea of necessities. Remember, paying that internet bill is extremely important if you want to continue on in business. So I would, he's gone again. All right. I'll wait till I see his beautiful face. But I think that's something that when it comes down to creating a book, two things that you need to think about. How would you use the book? And most people, I don't know how a book would do me any good. Well, a book can do you a lot of good in a lot of different ways. Number one, confidence. You literally being able to hold up the book and say, hey, you know what? I wrote the book on this. And being able to look back years from now and see, you know what? I did something cool. I did something significant. I was digging around. I found this book that I wrote almost 20 years ago with my dad called Turn Words into Traffic. Awesome book. About 80% of this is still as relevant today as it ever was. I need to come out with a new and updated edition, and we could probably sell another 20, 30,000 of them. That's the first thing. Having your own book gives you big time confidence in yourself. Number two, it gives you credibility with your target audience. If Stu had never written a book, Stu would still be Stu, but Stu wouldn't be Stu Smith. See the difference? He wouldn't be the guy he wouldn't have invented a whole genre of fitness, tactical fitness. And so having that book gives you massive amounts of credibility that you can use not only to translate into sales of the book, but also to translate into sales of other things like consulting, coaching, courses, workshops, live events, masterminds, you name it. If you look at the most successful people in pretty much any genre, any industry, ultimately, they've written a book either to sustain their place or they leveraged a book to get into the place where they are. Now, occasionally there are people that will write a book all the way at the end and it's kind of a memoir and things like that, but that's the exception rather than the rule. And the cool thing is that with Amazon and distribution and all that good stuff, and Stu mentioned Lulu, which is a way to do a print book on demand, which is pretty slick. And they'll do some neat stuff like spiral bound. You see how book is spiral bound, which is great because Stu's fitness books are kind of like cookbooks for having an amazingly cool, good looking body. So you, instead of like trying to hold the book open, like, hey, let me do some one-armed rows looking at this thing, what I'm supposed to do, you can take that book and lay it flat, and that's the workout this week. So if you don't have a book yet that has your name on it as the author, you really ought to consider strongly doing that, because the benefits, short-term and long-term, for your business, your psyche, your reputation are massive. Not to mention the fact, and I do this, if you don't like your brother-in-law, when next time y'all get together for Christmas or New Year's, you bring a copy of your book for everybody and hand it out and tell them how great you're doing because of it. And that sucker will talk about how he thought about writing a book. You betcha there, sport. Well, I'll be glad to read it when you get it done there, bub. So it's always fun with that. But in all seriousness, it doesn't have to take 4 years like it took me. You don't have to run around looking for a literary agent or begging a publisher to do your book. You don't have to try and put it together like Stu and the 3-ring minder and, using Scotch tapes to put the Polaroids in there to try and make it work. It has never been easier technologically or strategy or otherwise to get a book done super fast that's good and has information that came out of your head, and then be able to put it up on Amazon. And by the way, that's what makes a book a real book, not whether you got a publisher. Oh, let me look in here. Oh, it's not published by HarperCollins, not a real book. No, what makes it a real book is three things. First, it's got good content that came out of your noggin. 2, it's got a professional looking cover. And 3, it's published for sale on Amazon. That's what makes a book a real book for 99% of the people in the world. And guess what? The other 1% that might have any issue are dorks anyway, and you don't want them as a customer. So
there you go.
If you want to know 9 different ways to get your book done by this time next week, I'll show you. There are 9 different ways to do it, only one of which involves sitting down and slaving away at the keyboard, writing it out from scratch. I don't write my books like that anymore. Haven't. I didn't write this book that way. And this has sold over 85,000 copies around the world. That's a lot of copies. So if you want to know how to do that, you can go over to 7dayebook.com right now. I've been helping tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people over the last 20 years know exactly what to do to write and publish and sell their own books. I've been doing it for 20 years. If you go out and look at a lot of these courses and stuff where people are teaching you how to write a book, I can go back and show you where they bought my book, bought all my stuff, and I coached some of them. Okay, so if you want to come to the source of how to do it fast, I'm your guy.
And let me tell you something too. Even if you've done your own book before, even had a publisher, I had 10 published books before I met Jim. And his method showed me an easier way to get these done and get them up on Amazon. That was my biggest hump, I think, that I needed to not only design my books better, but also to get them up on Amazon. And his method was just part of the system. And so I just followed it. And
if I remember the first book that you did and got up on Amazon, we were able to help you make that a #1 bestseller. It was the first time you'd ever had a #1 bestseller on Amazon ever, even with all those other books.
Absolutely. Yeah. So highly recommend that one.
So there you go. So head on over to 7dayebook.com and we'll see you on the inside. So Stu, great job today.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye, everybody.